It's the Kink Consultant podcast, where we're turning up the heat on all things kink and dating, relationships, and pop culture. So close the door, plug in your headphones, and let's get down to it.
The thing was, 8 years in, you've seen all the regulars, you've met all the regulars. The people who don't want to see you don't want to see you. The people who are the guys that only see new girls. You know that there's like that type of person too. You've seen all these people, so you don't get as many sessions, unless you have a client that comes in every single week. I also started sensing that I was aging out of being a dom. And I'm sure if I had like some drive to really be a dom for the rest of my career, I could have made it work. And like we said, it's not a physical thing, but I went into a meet one time. The guy wanted something like very technical, very specific. Like he wanted caning and he wanted something that I was like, this is like not a new girl thing.
Session, yeah.
This is like somebody who needs to be skilled enough to know what you need in this hour. And I remember like, I thought that I had the session and then he picked a brand new 18-year-old. And I thought, I might be aging out of this. I might need to move on soon. Not because of just that it was a frustrating situation where it's like, I would have done a lot better in that session than this girl. But and it's not always about the technicality. It's about, like we said, the feeling of it, hit it off with him better. Sometimes what you think it is like, oh, he feels like he can take advantage of that person.
I think it's that. A lot of times, that's why they want the new girls. They think I can take advantage of them.
1,000% that happened so many times.
And I talked about this in one of my first episodes. The dungeon never made you feel like you needed to do anything. It was like a personal choice with what you wanted to do. So they didn't care if you said no. I just like to point that out because a lot of people think, oh, a dungeon, they're preying on girls. And it wasn't like that at all.
No. We just talked about this in my personal life. I had met someone who thought that I was being sex trafficked, basically.
It was a common misconception.
Right. And it's like, well, no, I go and sit in a room for 8 hours on my laptop. And then like 4 times a day, I go and meet, some weirdo. It's not like that at all. I say weirdo, but what I mean is like meeting these people is like you are learning about another piece of humanity that you had no idea existed sometimes. Like I learned so much about sexuality being at the dungeon, and I brought it into my own life. I kind of knew I was a little kinky, but it was like never a predominant thing in my sexuality. But like getting to explore it in new ways that you never even considered, like electro play and, like all kinds of stuff that
sound.
Oh man, like
needle play,
needles, and the vast amount of bodily fluids that you see and witness that people like that you had no idea was even a thing.
So true. No, you're spot on. I think that that's another thing of working in a dungeon, learning from other girls. Like as much as we joke about the hazing that was very real and sometimes scary, these same women would be mean to you. But before you went into a session, if you were doing something together, they were going to teach you how to do it right because we took pride in our work. That was like, the ones who were there longer, that's why new girls got a lot of flack too, because they weren't there to take pride in it. They were there to make money, as I'm sure many of us were when we first started. But you realize, oh, this is an opportunity to learn about new stuff that I didn't know about.
Absolutely. And it was not only new stuff, but like new people, like learning about how someone ticked in an hour and learning how to make that tick go. And you would sometimes switch up things in the moment where like they would tell me something and then like we'd be getting into the session and it's like, it isn't really working and I don't really sense that they're enjoying it as much as they thought they were. And you would it's a lot of reading people.
You have to be so intuitive.
It's
like you have to feel what they're feeling. It's hard to explain, but when you're around someone and they're not interested in what you're saying or they're not listening. And that was kind of it. And so you realized I have to switch something up here.
Totally. A lot of times I would feel we'd have a great session. You would learn how to time things out. So it's like, we're like 5 minutes out. Okay, we're going to finish up here. Then I would witness this a lot with our clients, the immense amount of guilt that would come over them as they were done and then as they were leaving. And sometimes like the aftercare of it, of being like, we weren't taught about those things at the time, but I would always feel so bad for them. And I would try to be like, it's okay that you like this, bud. It's like, it's fine. It's not a big deal. We're all okay here.
Oh, this is so normal. Everyone does this or wants this. And it's true. It is true. That is what they wanted. But yeah, you would sense that.
Clients that would get borderline suicidal. I remember being like, I would talk to the manager at the time. I'd be like, what's going on with that guy? Like, he seems to have so much fun in the session. We're having a great time. It's like, it's fun. And then once it ends, there is a huge switch and he becomes like a depressive person and says stuff like, I don't know why I do this. It really upsets me. I don't ever want to do this again. And you're like, well, okay, but did we not just have a good time?
I know. It's that post-nut clarity that I get.
The post-nut clarity. My favorite was when they would jump up and get dressed as fast as humanly possible. And you were like, just chill, dude.
I know.
We got some time. Just chill
Okay,
out.
but like, you know what didn't help? The Applebee's type of buzzer they would give you. So like,
I would always time it so it wouldn't ever feel rushed.
same. You can't help the ending if they're being slow.
Totally. Yeah, I forgot that.
So basically, when you went into a session, you didn't really take your phone into sessions because you were there to work.
I would have it in my basket.
Yeah, we got a little basket to go in. But like, you weren't taking it out and looking at it that often. But God forbid they did not want you to go over and for them to not get paid for the time in the room. So they would give you one of those restaurant buzzers that if you're like waiting for a table, you're handed it so you know when to show up back at the booth.
It really was well designed. I gotta say.
And the manager would like know what buzzer number you had. Like, I have number 13 and your buzzer would go off in an hour and you knew you had to leave, and you would call the manager and say, I heard the buzzer. We're finishing up. We're getting dressed. We're about to walk.
The phone ringing was like hurrying up. Let's get this going. You got to be done now.
Man, how do you not miss it?
Very easily. I look back on it at a time that I really enjoyed. I learned a lot. There was, disgruntled employee times too.
Yes.
It was monotonous at times and frustrating in many ways, dealing with clients who you knew were taking advantage of people or who were taking advantage of.
You had to be on the defense.
Yeah.
And protecting yourself.
And sometimes protecting other girls. Like, sometimes I would try to warn people, but it's tough because if they decide that they want to go into the session, there's nothing you can do about it either. And to think, oh, this guy is just going to continue coming here and continue going through the new girls until eternity. It's going to go on forever because people will keep saying yes, even if they're warned. Like,
there was a dark underbelly. It's almost like a Black Mirror episode, though. There are new girls who will always come in and say yes.
But I have to also accept that, like, my boundaries are not everybody's boundaries. What I think I would never do, some people would do.
Yeah.
And you know what? Some people need money, and their limitations for that were different than mine. And that takes another piece of the puzzle that you have to just accept, that some people do things that maybe I don't do, but they do. And that's, it is what it is.
You bridged the gap really well, because I remember I was always money hungry. Even though I had a good job, like, I was competitive in that I wanted to get the session. I wanted to do what I could. I remember once you saying to me, because I took less on a topless session or something, and it wasn't a cool thing to do. I was early enough, and your point was, listen, you can do that, but then that lowers the asking rate and the power that we all have to request a specific rate. And I never did it again.
And that's why you have to be close enough with some of these women to be able to talk about that. That's why some people get pushed out, because they start making the job less than for everybody.
It's true.
But it's tough because it's competitive, like you said. It's one of those things, it's part of the wobbly world that you live in there.
Because some women would go in and just get undressed for free. That was hard for everyone because it was like...
They'd have the picture on the website. That was another thing, was like the website pictures. There'd be like a topless or like a see-through shirt. The client knows that you're the one. And you would see those girls get a ton of sessions.
Yeah.
Because they knew what they could get.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, I don't want to have walked away from this point entirely, just about how clients would change at the end, because that was so common. Again, that's just one of those things you weren't psychologically prepared for. No one prepared you for how much of a sink or swim moment it was to figure out how to talk to someone who was emotionally vulnerable.
There was a lot about that job that was figure it out, and I've always felt like that was a piece of it that I never really got very well, just because everybody's different in that sense, but also everybody reacts so differently. Like, the very religious folks would act a very certain way, like we would get the Hasidic
oh my gosh,
Jews.
I talk about that. Yeah.
Their whole demeanor changed, but also that I didn't know anything about Hasidic Jews before I came to New York. So I was just wrestling with you. We were like almost naked or, whatever. And then it's like, I can't even touch. I would go to shake their hand and it would be like, no, we don't do that.
I know. Within that community, there's different levels of strictness too, because some of them had never apparently seen their wives naked.
Right.
One person had said that he was seeing me more naked than he'd ever seen his wife. And I was like, that is scary. But then others were a lot more flexible, I guess, in it. And I would always ask them, where does your wife think you are right now? They would answer my questions because I think part of what they enjoyed was the secrecy and getting to tell someone, like, here's the lie I'm telling right now, you know? Like, I just wanted a picture of their entire lives, and this was every fucking client. And speaking of, one of the wrestling sessions, did you ever get the high school wrestling coach? That's what he said he was. He gave me some advice that I take through life. He would say, you know what? Sometimes you need to make an illegal move, and you just have to calculate out whether or not it was worth the hit to them. Because if they're in too much pain to come and fight you back properly, 1 or 2 points can be lost for you. That makes a lot of sense in all aspects. And I guess, I don't know what high school he was coaching at, whether that was a real thing, but he would give, some of them would give us real life advice.
I definitely got financial advice from the financial guys. There was only a few of them. There were like things that were built on lies, but there was also a lot of people who were very open with helping you out.
I know. There were men who would come 2 to 3 times a week, every week, and they'd see different girls. And I remember when I realized, not that I expected my clients to be like monogamous with me, but I remember when I realized sometimes you'd be like, oh, you see them on this day? I didn't know they were coming in then. It feels a little weird. But when I calculated out how much they were spending, I was scandalized. I couldn't believe anyone had that much money. And then I got a little older and I realized how little I was working for. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, they were pretty nice and they were honest to an extent. They would be real with you.
Right.
And about emotional things as well. I guess one of the things I never realized, and obviously we were seeing a subsect of people like who were interested in this, I was always shocked at how many men would tell me stories about how they lost their virginity and it wasn't within their control at all. There were babysitters and they were really taken advantage of, but the story they were telling themselves was a little bit different. So like, again, these are some of those darker stories that they didn't outright say, but once you started to scratch the surface, those existed. But there were also a whole slew of clients who were just there for a good time, who lived good lives, and they were like, take me on a journey and take me on an adventure.
I definitely had hit a few of those too. The sad stories that come up. You find ways that the kink is kind of tied into that, you know, and it's like, it's a sad thing, but those were kind of the ones that would be depressive at the end, you know, like they would hit that moment. I definitely remember one guy, well, he didn't tell me a story, the manager did, you know, it tied very closely into his kink. I remember after one time I was like, you go see somebody, you know, like, why don't you talk to somebody about this? Because clearly this is really affecting you after you do it, but you feel like you have to do it. So it's like, maybe there's something else to dig here than just getting off.
I know. Like, honestly, that's part of why I do what I do now, because of all those stories. I mean, yes, there were the ones who were like, oh, I wish I'd known that this existed. I would have looked for a partner who was more interested in this. And there was that. But then there were the people who really went through something, especially as children, and they were working it out best way they knew to work it out, but there was extra work that could be done.
Totally.
You know?
Totally.
It wouldn't negate the kink. It's like what I always say, some kink is from trauma and some isn't, you know? And it's sometimes you would know the ones where their kink was from trauma.
Did you ever feel bad about doing anything in a session? Like, I definitely made a guy cry once and I felt horrendous. He was weeping. I think that was like one of the very few verbal humiliation. I wasn't very good at verbal humiliation, but I did it one time. It made this guy cry and I thought like, I can't do that again. It's not for me. And it's also like, I felt so horrible. I basically held that guy for like 20 minutes afterwards.
I did make people cry, but I didn't feel bad because I also pro-subbed, which I learned people don't realize I was a pro-sub as well, because I guess I don't say that outright. I cried in sessions, and sometimes people did make me cry accidentally, not through degradation, just by being a little intense.
Yeah.
And it's just par for the course. We all had safe words.
Right.
We could have stopped it.
I can count on one hand how many sub sessions I did. Some out of desperation and some out of like, it was like one of the first weeks that I was there and the manager was like, well, you should try to see if you're into it. Like,
I don't think that's bad advice.
I agreed. You don't know that you can do something or that it's a possibility for you. And I went into this session and I'll never forget, I think I was topless. He had a clothespin and he held up the clothespin and I saw he was going to go for my nipple.
Yes, this is common. Yes, okay.
And I don't do that.
Okay, fair.
And he went up and slowly let it clip on me. And I think I was tied up at the time, but not like really. And I started bawling. hysterical. This is like one of my first weeks.
The same client who made me cry that I was just referencing,
I don't know.
think this is the same session, not together.
It could be. The manager had told me he had been around a long time. He let the clip go instant. Hysterical.
Wait, when you say let the clip go, as in he didn't...
He's just slowly, he just let it clip onto my nipple.
Even though you said no.
I said, don't do that.
And he did it anyway.
He did it, like, it was like, maybe he thought I was teasing or something, but like, it was like, you couldn't have reined me back. I was like bawling. I left the session. We didn't finish. I left. And I went back into the room. The girl who'd been there for ages and ages, she saw me and the manager saw me and they're like, don't go to another subsession. That's not for you. Yeah. That's not for me. I think there was like maybe 1 or 2 subsessions I did after that, which were like, I was very clear beforehand that I'm not into subsessions and I don't want to be tied up. I remember there was like a handful.
You did 1 subsession and it was with another girl. That was her regular and you went in not as tip, but as the full other person. Right. I remember that.
Yeah, I was always fine not getting subsessions after that because I just remember the lack of control that you have is substantial. And to put your faith into these people who just walk in off the street, I have no idea how the pro subs do it, honestly. It just wasn't for me.
Now I'm wondering, the reason I'm having such a visceral reaction to it is because that is the one session where I cried and I created new boundaries from that session. He was a shibari guy and he did beautiful shibari. So when you explained the clothespins and the shibari, I was like, I think this is the same guy. And he had been around a while and everyone talked about how beautiful his rope work was, and it was. He put clothespins on me, set them on fire, and then knocked them off with a riding crop before the flames hit my skin. And that was really hot. But then...
in both senses.
It's actually kind of scary. But I remember thinking that was really cool. But then he put me in front of a mirror, made me look at myself, and told me how beautiful I was. And it was the most uncomfortable I had ever been in a session. And then I started crying. I didn't leave the room. But I'm wondering if this guy knew how to make people cry. So for years, I wouldn't let anyone tell me in session, I wouldn't let them comment on my physical appearance, positive or negative, because that was traumatic. We had the same session, that we had the same guy. He made both of us cry years apart. We didn't know until this moment here. And I think that is the beauty of the dungeon.
I remember he had come to the end of the rope and that was what he wanted to clip onto my nipples.
I know listeners are going to be like, well, why didn't you use your safe word? In a paid environment where you're being paid, even if it's a sub session, you saying no is the safe word that is commonly accepted.
Yeah.
Like, you saying no it's not a CNC situation where you're pretending you're okay with it. If you say no, they don't expect you to say red or be like, pterodactyl is my safe word. It's just, it is what it is.
I remember it was pretty clear he knew that I was a new girl and that I had never done that before.
I remember there was a client who used to see me regularly, and one of the things he used to ask me to do was age play. He wanted me to play a younger age, and that was common. I would do that. And I remember saying that was my session with him once a week. I remember saying it to another woman who worked there. I said, oh, I didn't realize you saw so-and-so too. He does this session with you, right? And she looked at me and said, he's never asked me to do that once. I knew a little bit about her history, but I figured out that one of the things is she had gone through some significant abuse as a child. And I think that he saw her and knew to never bring it up. Right. Because there were other people he had the same session with. So I just assumed we all did. And my point in mentioning this is I do think that some of these men had an innate sense of what they could and couldn't say. Just like I think this man might have known how to make you cry and make me cry. Okay. Are you friends with any clients?
Yeah. I get texts from some of them. They wish me, every holiday I get like a happy whatever, merry whatever.
Yeah.
There was Joe, who I saw for years, for a few hours every week. He ended up getting pretty ill enough that he couldn't walk to the dungeon anymore. Maybe 2 or 3 in my 8 years.
And they had to come a couple of times before you would consider.
Almost years for me. Yeah. It was like, the trust clearly was not there for a lot of them, but like once it got to that point where we had been seeing each other for years and sometimes they wanted to say like, hey, I can't come this week, or can you come on this day instead?
Yeah.
And it made more sense just to contact me directly, but he had contacted me and said like, I can't come anymore. Would you be willing to come to my house. He was like bedbound. And I did for a long time. I like went and because his session was fairly easy. He just wanted me to listen to his stories. So I went and saw him for a long time. His home health aide would leave for the hour to go get lunch and I would come in. After a while, he started offloading kind of his stash of
his paraphernalia.
Many things that were, I think if anybody found were he to pass away, they would be concerned about what kind of a person he was. So he started asking me if I would take it from him. And I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. I mean, it took probably weeks of backpacks, duffel bags.
And you would go every week.
And I would go every week and I would come back. I was riding a motorcycle at the time. So I would just on my back I would have huge stashes of porn.
What was the most interesting thing you took or had?
It was mostly porn that he had that was like, and he liked a lot of images that were like really violent, but he would mix them with other stuff too.
When I look back, I'm like, it wasn't actually that much money, but when I think about what I do now and the exposure I got to things, that was another great thing. If you were working as a sole dominatrix, getting your own clients, you were only doing sessions you were capable of because you weren't getting these internship opportunities to be taught for $20 how to extract ball fluid.
I never would do that in a session outside. It was so outside of my realm of...
Was it gross?
It was... just felt so technical, like medically sound it is, but to have the confidence to pierce someone's balls straight through, I don't know if it was like I didn't want to hurt somebody permanently, so I would never take that session, you know? Like, if people wanted something, I felt like I had to be at least competent enough to not fuck somebody up for the rest of their life.
I'm just thinking of, like, as you say that, I'm thinking about the girl who allowed her clit to be pierced. Like, I lost a session to her because she was like, yeah, you can pierce my clit. I asked her, like, why would you do that? And she's like, I don't know, just wanted to see what it was like. And this woman had a boyfriend and everything. I'm like, is he not going to wonder why you're coming home with a pierced clit? Like, these types of things of like, we don't know this guy, we don't know that he has any experience piercing clits.
Totally. You know, I often wonder who still goes there.
I remember one time going in for a meet and this guy had this bag of toys and he opened the bag and there were cockroaches in the bag.
Oh, God, I remember that guy. They kicked him out.
They kicked him out because they knew him and he had brought cockroaches before. There's a rule there, like no bugs, and that was because of him. Like a real one, not like one of the fake ones, like show up on time.
Be clean and sweet smelling. I remember sweet smelling was one of the words.
Owner didn't want people sweet smelling. He was not the type, but he had some amazing equipment at that place. Like he had a wheel that would turn you upside, that you'd strap yourself into.
Yeah.
It was a playground. He built his own playground. Mm-hmm. If I won the lotto, I would make something exactly like that for myself.
Like I said, the benefit was showing up to a fully stocked dungeon. Absolutely no training, which was bad and good. But also, you didn't have to advertise. They advertised for you. They were the safety for you. Everyone asked me if I would do it outside, and I always said no, just because it was so much work if you had to do all that other stuff. It was worth it to me to take a pay cut, you know, of $80 an hour.
And that was criminally low, and we found other ways to make money. And I know a lot of people, there are a lot of people who are like, you did it for that little money, but the safety is what mattered so much.
Yeah,
like you couldn't really put a price on your own safety to know that you were walking in and walking out, and you weren't walking out alone. Like at the end of the night, everyone left together. At the end of your shift, you might leave at different times, but that was the middle of the day. Right. If it was the end of the night, no one left until everyone left.
Oh,
so
okay.
I know you wouldn't know. You weren't like leaving at 2 a.m. in the morning.
2 was too late.
And sometimes if the only exception is if a client was there and staying beyond closing time, you would stay. I left that dungeon at 4 a.m. sometimes. I had a guy who would like for me to smoke in front of him, and I would smoke. You just basically chain smoke cigarettes. And that was the session.
I did that session once. It sounds easy when you say it. Oh yeah, all you have to do is sit there and smoke, but you would be fucked up for the next 2 days.
It was horrible. And then, do you know who else was interesting? Tweaky Tom.
I never sessioned with him. I thought he got kicked out.
No, he didn't get kicked out, but I do remember the lore. We would all talk about it, but I remember being told, and all the session was you were fully clothed and dancing in front of him like it was a strip club. But the reason he would go is because you can't openly do coke at a strip club. And he would be messy with it, right? And the girl said he's super paranoid, so don't go anywhere near the coke on the floor or the table, because even though he's dropping it, he thinks you're trying to steal his coke. And that was a Tweaky Tom session. You just twirled and danced for him and stayed away from his coat.
I did not know that was a session. I don't think I ever saw him. I heard it. Like you said, the lore.
I mean, and then there is, this person's infamous. I'm using their name. Mental Dental.
I never saw him.
I
never saw him.
couldn't get a session with him because my teeth weren't good enough. That was the thing. He needed real good teeth. He needed to show up and he'd look at your smile. You'd just know if you got it or not. And I knew I couldn't get it, but he just wanted you to pretend you were his dentist. All right. Any other weird clients?
We could go on for hours.
We probably could. I would recommend someone working at a dungeon like that if they were interested in this. Would you?
Yeah, that was kind of what brought me there. I was interested in it and I thought it would be funny. I can't believe that it ended up working for so long, but it worked for so long because it was so flexible. I was able to work around my schedule. And it didn't matter if I made money or not because it was an extra job for me. It was like I had enough options to not make desperate decisions.
I agree. I made certain decisions because I wanted to make more money. And I did make good money there just by showing up and getting the tip-ins and doing things like that. But also, I had just moved to the US from Ireland less than a year before. So I didn't have a lot of friends. So these girls were my friends. I remember on Saturdays, if you came in just for a session, you were leaving, I would convince you to stay. And you would stay hours longer talking to me. And I don't think anyone could understand. You never want to stay at your job after your shift is done.
Right.
But we made real friendships and it was fun.
I had fun. I feel like I learned a lot about myself and a lot of skills that helped me beyond. Have nothing to do with BDSM, but have everything to do with
negotiation,
relationships.
Working with people. Yeah. And I think just understanding sometimes people aren't telling you the whole story and you kind of got to figure it out.
Definitely, yes. A healthy dose of skepticism wherever you go. I feel like it helped me kind of not accept things as they came, not making a snap judgment about something. And I think that helps a lot with the BDSM community, figuring out, okay, this sounds really taboo and this sounds like something that normal people would scoff or recoil at, but I'm interested in why.
It started my entire career path. That job at the time was just a way to make money and have fun. And now it's the foundation of my entire career and business is doing that work.
I feel that it helped me in a lot of things, especially in steeling myself or in seeing extreme situations.
That's so true. I am phased by so little now. You just kind of got to roll with it.
Right. The major reaction usually is what is the negative part about it. If you can take a step out of it and let it kind of unfold first, you have more time to
process.
To react in a way that's not an extreme.
I'm having this little montage in my head of different things. It's in a world where everything gets normalized. Things you just realize, okay, this isn't so extreme. Let's process what's happening. And sort of learn to accept it.
Totally.
I don't know how you don't miss it.
I'll tell you why. Because once you hit into the 7 or 8 year mark and the 6, 7, 8 year mark, and you start seeing the same things happening over and over. And like I said, I was getting passed up for people that were younger than me, and it was it's not only a blow to the ego, but it's also when you don't make money there, you're just sitting around. I started having relationships, and it obviously affects relationships in a way that they can be not beneficial. But it also, I had other places I wanted to be for 8 hours. It's nice hanging out with girls that you like and that are there for a while. There were still girls there that I really liked. But then there was a bunch of new girls again that start a different dynamic. And when you're the only person that's been there for 8 years and everybody else has been there for a week, you're like, how many of you are going to stick around? Do I want to invest in any relationships right now?
There were waves, even while I was there, just these 3-month waves of we would get a bunch of young girls in who would go to a club after they got out. And it was that was that group.
So, it gets a little old, and it definitely felt like that part of me was retiring. And it was nice to say that I was a retired dom.
One of the things I do remember, sort of to your point of you have other places you want to be. The other thing is you also had other places you could be. So you started in 2010. I started in 2013, but there were girls that had been there from before the big financial crisis, and they had given up good jobs because the money they were making as doms was so good that there was no other job that they could have gotten at the time. And I just remember talking to them about it now, and they couldn't go back to those jobs or careers without starting over. And the money wasn't the same either as pre-financial crisis. That's what scared me and made me really wary. And there were many weeks where I made more at the dungeon than I made at my actual job. I just remember thinking do not fall in love with this money, Amanda, because it could go away.
Right.
Yeah, and to your point, you can age out. And I think a lot of women they upskilled to stay in the game.
Right.
In ways that, like you kind of said, that was an option too for you if you wanted to.
If you wanted to, you can start marketing yourself and you can go and start doing everything you want on your own. That's really the only real upscale you can do, unless you want to negotiate with the owner, making more money. But
which also they did, and they had their right to do it.
They did, totally. But if you're sitting there for 8 hours, you're not guaranteed any work.
And the probably disappointing thing to a lot of these people is we were all doms, but many of us went out and were subs to our boyfriends.
Yeah,
if we were dating.
That was true.
Did you date during your time working there?
I did often. It was a mixed bag of how it worked out. I feel like I was always teaching my boyfriends at the time things.
Yeah.
I would always be dating vanilla guys who were interested. I remember one, I basically like showed him all the ropes. I gave him
literally
a literal crash course in everything BDSM, anything you could think of. We ended up breaking up at one point. I found out he cheated later on. I found out that he like goes to sex clubs now and specifically like
asks for what
so into it, hardcore. I remember being like, I don't know how I feel. I guess that's, I don't know. I guess that's fine.
You just uncovered something. I mean, he wouldn't have kept doing it if he wasn't interested.
Right. There were so many of them though that like I felt like I would teach them everything and then they'd be like, all right, well, see you later. There were other things going on, obviously, but we were just talking about this. But one of the things that I really learned early on is that you do not say that you're a dominatrix on the first date. It does not work out that way.
Good or bad or both.
Mostly bad. I mean, for a while it was my joke that, like, sometimes it'd be good. They'd be into it, or they'd be into something, but it wouldn't be what I was into, so it wouldn't work out that way. But there were many people who had very bad reactions, and it was like, it was the first date killer. If I wanted to not see this person again, I would tell them that I was a dominatrix, and it would pretty much effectively kill
the entire... Oh, that's really funny. If I didn't want to see people again, I just told them that I was still married. Legally, I was. I wasn't divorced yet. I would never bring this out ever. Like I would go on dates with people and just not tell them that this was what I did.
Really?
Yeah.
I was always like, I gotta get this out because I feel like it's a thing for people, so they should know beforehand. And that was not the way to go.
I tell people on my first dates now that I'm kinky. I tell people now because I'm so public about what I do. Like, what's your job? I'm the kink consultant. That's my job. Like, I talk about this all the time.
Does that make dating harder, you think? Yeah.
It definitely does, because you get a split of people who are like really interested in it. And it's like, how did you become that? And I'm like, go listen to episode 1 and 2 of the podcast. Like, I don't want to be an asshole, but I'm also like, I can't keep doing this. Like, no one asked you how you became a lawyer. Do you know what I mean? But then for other people, it's like, oh my God, you're great. This is so interesting. I could never date anyone so public about it, which is fair.
Right.
But it makes it harder.
Totally.
Like, I have this major crush on someone who has an issue with my job, and it doesn't really affect us, but because it's like, okay, I've known that since the beginning. We know we're not going anywhere. But sometimes I think about it, I'm like, I would never give up my job for this person, but it's a constant reminder of my job does block certain things.
Yeah, for sure. Funny enough, it was probably like 8 months to a year in when the conversation came up in the dungeon of, are we sex workers or not? And I didn't even consider it. I, like, honestly did not even think that I was a sex worker.
Really?
At all. I had no concept of that. It didn't even occur to me that this was sex work, which is stupid. It's naive. But it was like, it wasn't until that conversation came up that I really had to reconcile, like, oh, I'm a sex worker. I'm not a prostitute.
That's where the confusion comes in. We're not having sex with our clients.
Right.
We weren't having sex with our clients. Like, we would do cock and ball torture. So yeah, there was touching there, but we weren't bringing them to orgasm physically.
Right.
But yeah, it's sex work.
It's exactly what it is. And then you have to start reconciling, because the philosophical questions would always come up of like, are we selling our bodies? And it's like, well, technically, yes.
It's just sort of like the work we did make us sex workers. I think if you are a dominatrix, I think it's listed. But now I'm like, why do people not consider strippers sex workers? They do. Okay.
Do, yeah. I think so. I mean, that in that conversation that came up as well.
Well, I've always assumed that they were, but when I think about who's listed on coalitions of people fighting for sex workers' rights, I'm like, are strippers on that list? I know dominatrixes are, but I guess I look out for that. And I'm like, oh.
My job now, which is like a very public-facing government job now, I had gotten into a huge argument with one of the guys there because they said, like, they were talking shit about strippers, basically, like that they were selling themselves, like they were no better than prostitutes. prostitutes. I was kind of like, okay, but you go see strippers. So like, what's the deal here? Like, why do you look down on them when you go and pay them for their services? He could not understand why I was fighting for this idea. He's like, Verna, you've never been a stripper. You've never been a prostitute. You've never done that. I can't out myself, you know, but it's like,
I can have empathy, maybe?
It's rough because it's hard. Once people decide about sex work, they have decided. And that was like kind of the part about the first dates. Once someone thinks that you're in this sex work BDSM world, their mind goes to something that you don't exactly know what it means because they don't know what the whole umbrella of that means.
And they're going to key in on one specific thing that probably matters the most to them, positive or negative.
Totally.
Okay, I was on a date recently, and obviously they know what I do, but I mentioned having been a dominatrix and a pro sub. And he was fine with the dominatrix thing, but he couldn't understand how a sub could be that. And I explained how it's a switch. But he also didn't understand how I could be a pro sub and not do anything sexual for anyone. And that told me a lot about him as a dom, because I was like, you're probably not the dom for me. If you can't stretch your imagination far enough to understand how we could play in a way that I'm submissive without me sucking a dick or taking cock in any way, shape, or form.
And that was my joke for so long, was that like, if you want to know what someone's into, tell them you're a pro dom and they'll immediately tell you.
Don't peg me.
Exactly. That happened on a first date once. The guy said, I'm not going to let you peg me after I said I was a pro dom. It was like, oh, good to know. I got a lot of information from the dungeon that informed my own personal sexuality.
Same. There were things that I discovered that I really enjoyed. There were buttons I enjoyed being pushed, and I've been able to take that into my own life and also just have these really amazing, authentic experiences. My philosophy in life, as long as I'm having fun. I just want to make sure I'm having fun, and then good things happen.
Totally.
Like, even if it is me being at work, how do I make this fun? I was at the dungeon a much shorter amount of time than you, but I was, again, in that weird in-between stage of all of the young ones would drop off, and then it was just the ones who had been around 5+ years. There was no in-between other than that, except for the 3 years you were there by the time I got there.
There are definitely good times. There are definitely many good relationships with the girls that I would say you're probably the only person I still really keep in contact with.
And we do a good job of, maybe one of us falls off because now we live in different cities.
Yeah,
but
it's a very good time in my life. I don't consider it a bad time. Do I want to go back? No. It was the time that I was there.
And I found a way to make that, what I loved about that job, I found a way to bring it back into my life.
Totally.
In a way that works for me. Okay. Say someone comes to you and says, I want to be a dominatrix. What advice would you give them? Would you tell them to go work in a dungeon or do it themselves?
Oh, 1,000% go. I mean, if you're living in a major city that has a dungeon, if everything's already set up for you, it's so much easier to see how it's run. I mean,
you learn so much. Yeah.
You learn so much, and we were saying before, the owner had a really good system set up. I had heard that they were not as good as ours. I don't know, because I never worked there, because I was always happy enough to stay where I was.
We had a bad name, that it was a tough place to work, because we weren't as fancy or upscale as Pandora's. And Pandora's had a club attached to it. Right. The women were probably less catty and a little less crazy. We were fast and loose sometimes with things like Coke. I mean, I can't count the number of times someone would be like, do you want a bump? Like, the girl's working there. Very generous. That didn't fly at other places, and that kind of gave us a bad name, even though I do think we were the most organized. I genuinely think we were the most protected group of women working, and it was never about that. Because I know that there were women who were not forced to do certain sessions, but you had to go nude. If you were...
Oh.
Yeah, there were dungeons...
awful.
Yeah, there were dungeons like that, and we were really empowered to make our own choices.
Yeah, thank God. Yeah, I would have been out. I've been out on the nakedness. It's too much, too vulnerable. Just a complete stranger, I can't. I would say yes, go to a dungeon. I can't imagine someone starting everything from scratch and not being vulnerable in many ways. I mean, by the law enforcement, by the clients, by everything.
It's risky.
It would be so risky for me to say you should be a pro dom. If you're really into it and you want it to be fun, like, just go to a sex party, is my thought. If you want to be a pro dom, I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, I'd say majority of people live in a space that doesn't have a good dungeon. That's a setup.
Yeah.
If you live in New York City and you can vet the dungeon, I know there are definitely private dungeons around where pro-doms own, either houses or brownstones or whatever, and they've set them up like dungeons, and they rent out to themselves basically, or they like within
they have their
group.
own little coalition, their group of people. Yeah.
Totally. If that's an option, for sure. But the rest of it is just so risky to me.
I think it's also a different landscape now. OnlyFans has changed the game.
Oh, it's an interesting thought. Right. Of like a pro-dom in a virtual sense.
Yeah, that's such a different thing. Your safety is there, so that's
easy. But I mean, but it's hard to
get clients.
I guess if you're motivated and that's like what you're interested in, it would work out well. The interesting part to me, and the part that was the learning experience, was interacting with people in a private setting and trying to figure out their deepest, darkest desires in an hour, and to deliver it in a way that was organic and also that was like fun for you too, and really hit all of their buttons. I can't imagine doing it to a screen. When I Zoom alone, I like stare at my face and it's like, oh God, I can't stand, it's like too much. I'm like staring at myself for an hour, and it's like, you can't interact with that. To be in a room with someone, it was the interesting part to me.
The energy exchange.
Yeah.
I agree with that. And I know people who do it because there are certain things that you can do from afar, like chastity or, the verbal humiliation, degradation. There was something special about being in the room with someone. And impact. I think we both enjoy impact play. I enjoy giving and receiving in sessions. You definitely gave. You can't do that online, obviously.
Even the stuff like chastities. I can't imagine doing something from afar. It just doesn't make sense to me. I was always a very touchy person in general. Like, I would still want to interact with person.
Same.
I can't imagine personally making a whole dungeon scenario or a Dominatrix hour-long Zoom meeting, basically. OnlyFans.
Neither can I.
But the being naked part was not interesting to me. The being exposed on my end wasn't interesting. It was always the psychological of their end. Was what was important to me personally. So it was like, different strokes for different folks, for sure, for why you want to be a dom.
You kind of have to know that to know whether or not.
That's such a high level thing of post-nut clarity. When I was 21, I didn't understand any of that. I just thought it would be funny and interesting to beat people.
I know, you start off like that same person that we're sort of annoyed at when we leave.
Totally.
Very last question. Do you have a favorite session, one specific session that stands out in your mind as that was the most fun session I've ever done?
There was way too many to say that, but there's always so many realizations that came from so many different people that I never would have thought I would have had fun, I'll never forget walking home from work after I pissed in someone's mouth for the first time and thinking, I can't believe my excrement just made me money. And it was like the funniest, like happiest I could have ever been in my life. I was always like, how do I do the least for the most amount of money? And
being in someone's mouth
was like, oh, I do that anyway. But like the gross out sessions weren't always my favorite, but like wrestling, I always had a good time with people. I always thought it was fun and it related to a lot of my like other pieces of my life. I just had a lot of fun with a lot of people, that old dudes that I never would have interacted with in the real world.
The interactions with people who you would never meet anywhere else.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it was all over the place, but it was always interesting. That was the good part.
That's like the one good thing I can say about it. Never a dull day. Because even if there weren't a lot of clients, some interesting shit was going on between at least two of the girls that made it interesting. All right, Verna, thank you so much for coming on. It was really nice to sort of like take this long, intricate walk down memory lane.
Thanks for having me.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with anyone who might find it interesting. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover in future episodes, feel free to reach out. Email info@thekinkconsultant.com. Until next time, keep on kinking on.